what does a vegan, for fuck's sake, what does a vegan diet, carnivore diet, keto diet, ancestral diet, what do they have in common with one another? Well, it's discernment, isn't it? They have made a conscious choice to no longer be unconscious consumers. If we think of that base layer of a place where we've all been, we go to the supermarket, we kind of just pick up any source of food and eat it without considering where it's come from, how it was treated, and how it's going to affect the state of our well-being. So rather than these different camps, different diets be polarized, ideally they would be unified by the fact that they have made a decision for whatever reason, health reasons, sort of moral reasons, to go a better way for themselves and the world around them. And consciousness is everything. It doesn't matter if it's experiencing being a tree or experiencing being a furry four-paw creature. Everything is all from the same place. From my personal point of view, what I've discovered is that it doesn't matter if it's a tree, a plant, a fish, or an insect, cow. What matters is how what you consume has lived its life, and we can sort of make our decisions on what we consume based on how much light it has. Now, this can be seen in two ways. We can see it sort of literally as well, how much sunlight has that being managed to harness in its lifetime. Generally, the more sunlight that being has captured, the healthier it is. So we can see, if we look two opposing examples, a cow that spent its whole life outside on a field eating grass which has seen sunshine, because all food is photons manifested as matter. And it's a chain of photons manifesting and transferring energy into different forms of matter. Photons coming from the sun. The sun is the life sort of source on this material plane. And notice that I don't need to eat as much in summer when there's more sunshine out than I would in winter, where I'm effectively getting sunshine from steaks, bone broths, and fruits, green plants. I'm consuming their captured sunshine. So those states of foods that have had the most sunshine and the least amount of interference, so from pesticides and all that stuff, are the healthiest. And whether you decide to only consume that through plants or only consume that through animals doesn't really matter, so long as those beings have also been treated in a light way. Now, like attracts like. So if someone is choosing to consume, I don't know, like a chicken that's been matured too quickly, fed shit all its life, and it's in these cramped barns, never seen sunlight, gets stamped on, crushed bones, and then it's just slaughtered. The emotional sort of what it's storing emotionally is going to be horrendous. The trauma, the feelings of just being like a slave and used, and we consume that energy. It's not just a piece of meat. It will consume its grief. But what I would say is what what is it about that person or animal or whatever, consuming that chicken, stomped on, barn horror, that is, what is it about that consumer that's attracted to that? Now, what I mean by like attracts like is that we consume a part of ourselves. It reflects something back to us. So what is it about that person's life that also feels like it's enslaved, that it's just sort of being used for an economic, quite greedy machine? And what is it about that person that feels sort of unconscious and powerless to do anything about it? In effect, when we sort of make those decisions to eat something like that, just like a piece of chicken, like I guess piece of chicken that is in a supermarket, like non-organic or whatever, what does that say about like our life? In the least judgmental way, I say that because the moment we start to make decisions about what we consume is also the moment where we're making decisions about our own life, our sense of freedom, what we want to do and what we want to say no to. So now I find myself unable to consume any kind of thing that's been treated in such a way, because I don't feel like I live my life that way anymore either. I feel pretty free and powerful and wild and spirited, so what I consume tends to reflect that. My reality won't even entertain it. My meat I get delivered to me from a farm, and the vegetables I tend to get from a farmer's market, so seasonal stuff as well, which has had no pesticides on it. It hasn't always been that way. I actually find it easier to do that and more convenient than going to a supermarket. And but I'll give a recent example. My son wanted to go for a Sunday roast. He just fancied one. He's 5. I was like, all right then. And it was a stormy day. We hadn't been outside. Kind of wanted to go for a walk somewhere at least. And we arrived everywhere. Everywhere was full. Like, we had to wait for 3 hours or something. And yeah, we got rejection is redirection to somewhere else, isn't it? You could have just given up, could have waited. Instead, I just walked down the streets, my local area, and I discovered a French restaurant I'd never seen or heard of before. And they were doing Sunday roast. And the place was pretty empty. There's about 2 other tables. It's really nice inside, candlelight, cozy. And then I looked at the menu and it was so good. They only made homemade sauces, bread, gravy, and all of their meat was grass-fed, organic, and they'd sort of written all these things about how important it was to them to source the right things. And this place was the menu was the same price as all these other random standard pubs. But I had, my reality had guided me to a place where I was going to consume food that was more aligned to, I guess, what I believe in and what I want to eat, without me even really consciously trying to. So this is kind of how it works. It just becomes easy because I'm just on a different frequency now. And I want to be on the same frequency as, wonderful animals and plants who have really got to experience what it is to be the ideal form of a cow. And that would be in a field with her cow friends, being able to milk her own calf. And we would take a little bit of that surplus, for instance. It wouldn't be to consume the milk of a cow who has been bred for that purpose solely, and then she gets her calf taken away from her so people can put it on their cereals. So when that happens, whoever's consuming that milk on their cereal is in effect consuming the grief of a mother cow who wasn't able to feed her own child, and all of the toxins that are going into the, all of the growth hormones and all of that stuff you're consuming. There's, everything is connected, and until we stop feeling like we are being milked, we will always consume something else that's being milked. It's a reflection. And so diet is more than just, gaining some energy. Lots of the foods we eat, processed foods, actually take energy from us, I feel. But it's sort of a multifaceted approach to life, isn't it? And nourishment. And when what we consume is in harmony, we too are also in harmony. I like to look at diet like that, not the complicated pathways, the nitty gritty, or this vitamin does this vitamin does this, because that just gets so overly complex and boring. It's more energetic. How light is what we consume? How light has it lived its life? And that I mean that energetically and spiritually, as well as the sort of example of sunlight. And by light, it's how authentically has that animal been able to live, or that tree been able to live. So if it's left alone, and I guess it has the support of the world around it, a deer just running around like a deer without being fenced in or, forced to eat soy, is going to have lived a very light life. And animals and plants are not below us in any sort of food chain. They're extremely high in consciousness, plants especially. And they're very aware that death is not the end, it's only a transition. So some indigenous tribes report that they don't even have to go out hunting. A deer or an elk will sort of just offer itself to them, because it understands that by being consumed by the humans, it essentially becomes a part of the humans as well, because everything is just cyclical and eternal. And that's a beautiful way of looking at it. And then, if we see consumption like that, just a transfer of energy and honouring what we consume, that we honour ourselves in return. But if we sort of just grow things such as plants and animals just for our consumption and treat them very inhumanely, we're also treating ourselves very inhumanely as well. So diet can get so complicated because there's so many different opinions and studies, which just, I think they just really, the agenda behind that is just distract us away from our own instincts and vibrational attractions. We just got to listen to our intuition, and when we love ourselves, what we consume also loves itself and wants to give abundance. When we want to give abundance, we get abundance in return. And that's what I mean by, being light. And there's all these sorts of things going on, with gluten or dairy and allergies to certain things. But it's just what's the actual enemy here? Humans have been consuming bread for thousands, probably way more, hundreds of thousands, even millions of years. There's a reason why we like bread, it's, if we're sort of drawn to something, then there's a good reason for it. But the problem isn't gluten, it's the glyphosate that's been sprayed on it, but also there are like hundreds of chemicals that are going into the bread. Even 40 years ago, there weren't that many sort of chemicals going in. Bread would be homemade, and no one really had intolerances to bread at all. It's the shit that's going into food that makes us allergic to it, and for good reason. We should produce symptoms against poison to essentially stop us from eating that poison again. And when we consume something that we feel nourished, then we should be sort of directed towards that sense of pleasure again, because it was so good for us. So yeah, if there's any type of like gas or fatigue that happens after a meal of any sort, then there's something that you've eaten that's been poisonous to you. With children, it's trickier to manage their choices. I have a 5-year-old. I wouldn't say he's like, the best eater in the world. Neither is he, only in chips, for instance. He eats vegetables, never. Cucumber's the only green thing. I don't mind that, because I think children are naturally deterred from eating green plants, because in the wild they're quite toxic. It's only when we learn to cook the toxins out of them that we sort of gain some nutrients from them. But I think it's actually quite a good instinctive thing for kids not to like their greens. Plants make fruits as colourful as possible because they want their fruits to be consumed. Because usually they've got some sort of seed in them. We'll consume the seed, and when we excrete that seed out a few miles away or whatever, a few yards away, that seed's then essentially in like manure and in the perfect conditions to grow away from its parent plant as well. We've essentially been a courier for its children. So it wants the fruit to be eaten, and we get a dopamine hit from eating that fruit, from the little bit of sugar that plant put in. And it was a very mutual sort of deal that animals and fruit plants had for, millions of years. And so my son likes all fruits, especially the colourful ones, because he knows that that's good for him and that they're safe. A plant, for instance, doesn't want to have its stem eaten or its leaves, because they are vital parts of how it sort of photosynthesizes and, remains alive. A fruit, it can drop and create another one. It won't die. As if we sort of tug it at its root, it dies, and so it creates toxins, like goitrogens, I think we call them. I don't know how it's pronounced. To make us feel sick if we eat them, so we won't eat them again. So yeah, the green thing, I think children are kind of very on point to not eat them. Marketing, like sort of confectionery companies use that our sort of desire towards colour, the purple and the reds, as wrapping for their sweets and the chocolate bars, because that's what we would have been naturally drawn to in the jungles. So, but yeah, with kids, it is slightly tricky. He eats meat and rice, bread, potatoes, cheese, raw milk he has. But there's always these temptations, isn't there? Like birthday parties is the worst. And it's very difficult to, I guess, say no to him having a birthday cake, or even, an ice cream by the beach. I'm all right with those things, because having an ice cream by the beach is an experience. It creates joy. If we think of ourselves as consciousness wanting to go down to planet Earth and experience being human, we also maybe want the experience of licking ice cream by a beach. And like those kind of things, I don't think should be sort of ignored or cancelled just because they're not strictly healthy or the lightest foods. If they sort of create a moment of joy sometimes, then that is light as well. So, and it's important, I think, with children to allow them to make, I guess, their own choices and mistakes when it comes to diet. If I was 100% strict and said no to every single like chocolate or cake, then he would feel maybe left out from his peers, and also then he's not being given the autonomy to figure out what works for him. Now, I mean, 5 years old, he has become very discerning about what makes him feel good and what makes him feel bad. So, you know, he'll always like say, yeah, I want cake at the birthday party. But then an hour later, oh, my tummy hurts. And we sort of make the association between, well, what made your tummy hurt? He says, oh, it's the cake. And so that next time there's that temptation of chocolate or cake, he'll even sometimes go, oh, no, I don't want a bad tummy. He realises that thing made his tummy hurt. Whereas, like, I guess when I was growing up, no one really made the associations between what we were eating and how we were feeling. We just sort of had like thought like a tummy ache would just like spring up on us for like no reason. Whereas now he needs the experience of eating a cake to know what makes him feel good and what makes him feel bad. Whereas if he had zero experience of those sort of, you know, processed products, then he wouldn't have a clue what makes a human feel sort of a bit sick and what makes them feel nourished and energetic. So yeah, I kind of go by the rule, like at home we're really good. 95% of our lives we're really good, but you know, that 5%, it's just about exploring other avenues as well, because it's not about being perfect all of the time. So yeah, I just sneak vitamins in. So if I'm creating pancakes, you can whiz up liver, for instance, which is full of nutrients. If you look at killer whales, they'll always go for the organs over like the fin or the muscles, because the liver is where we store all of our nutrients, and it's where other animals store their nutrients, including vitamin D, sunshine. And so yeah, that's where all of the harnessed energy and vitamins is stored. So by consuming that, it's very easy for us to, you know, gain a whole load of nutrition. And I whiz them up and I put them in as pancakes. Because I don't think you'd like the taste of liver by itself. It's quite acquired taste. So its diet can be very light or it can be very dark. It's an exploration of being human, being alive. But ultimately I find it's good to be non-judgmental about what other people are eating. In terms of what I think about each sort of diet, it's keto I think is a really good reset, and a really good way to detox sugar out of the body. Many people are really hooked on sugar, they don't even realise how hooked they are. It acts like a drug. I think, there's been experiments where rats were given the choice of sugar and cocaine and they'd go for sugar every time. You can see it when I don't eat much sugar at all. And when you're off it, you don't even want it. But when a lot of people sort of are just having it in their daily life thinking it's normal, they get hangry quite quickly and crave it. Now if someone offers me a biscuit, I actually my reaction to it in my own head is it's the same as if someone was offering me a can of dog food. I'm like, oh no thanks. They're kind of shocked, it's not hard in any way. I'm not going no, and then secretly inside going, oh, I'm really craving that biscuit. When you're off it, you just don't crave it anymore, because you've got a different microbiome. You've got a sort of a microbiome that wants to eat celery and red meat. Keto, so that's high fat, high good fat, not a lot of sugar or carbs at all, is a very good, I think, phase to go for a period of time where you can detox your body from sugar, but not necessarily a long-term thing, because there's a fruit feel that goes with it. I think fruits are good. Nutrition, I even think that they stabilise sugar levels, even though they've got sugar in them. And I think, we're supposed to eat them, and the plants want us to eat them. So I think about that one. Vegan diet, I think theoretically should be fine nutritionally, because if we're thinking, oh, we want to harness light, as much light as we can, and bearing in mind that in order to consume high levels of light, we ourselves have to be able to harness light within ourselves, and some people actually can't, or are on their way to harnessing more. Vegan, the problem with the modern one is that it's incredibly artificial and processed. So people might think they're being healthy, but actually they're consuming even more artificial ingredients than ever before. When I was vegan, it was more in my teens. It was before soy milk was even anywhere, so I wasn't having any alternative milks. And I kind of cooked stir fries. I cooked my own meals when I was at home as a teenager. Stir fries, rice, dal, stuff like that I ate. And I was alright. I was quite fit at the time as well, quite athletic. I did feel quite good. Maybe I probably ate too many carbs, like pasta and rice, and I'd get a bit full. So I don't feel like that anymore. But I think if you do it that way, like if you look at the blue zones are, some scientists went around the world trying to work out sort of why certain areas had the highest living population. So people living over 100, beyond, more so there than any other places. And they largely had vegetarian diets with some bits of meat, so like a goat every Sunday or something, or some fish sometimes. It wasn't meat every day. Largely vegetarian, but it wasn't processed stuff. It was seasonal and grown in the land. So I think that's the most important thing with diet. Is it seasonal? Has it been grown in sunshine? Has it been sprayed with poison? All of those stuff are the questions. It's not about if it's an animal or a tree. Trees are really high in consciousness, maybe more so than animals. They're very wise, they're very intelligent. They're not lower in the food chain or lower in intelligence in any way. So that's why, from my perspective, I don't see the difference between eating an animal or a tree or a plant, because they're just the same, as long as they've been treated well and honoured and all of that stuff. So where was I going? Yeah, vegan. Yeah, I think it's all right as long as it's not processed. And bearing in mind we all have different. This is why it gets complicated. Kind of genetic makeup. Whereas, if our ancestors lived by the ocean, we're more likely to sort of be able to utilize the minerals and vitamins from a fish than someone who had lived more inland and in cows. I think certain blood types maybe have got to do something with diet. So like O is more of a hunter-gatherer diet, high exercise, and A is more agricultural. Type B is more I think that was sort of evolved in the Mongol areas, so they're better. I think they tolerate milk a little bit better because they used to drink the milk of the horses, so they would go on the sort of steppes around. That's a whole other thing. So it can be nuanced, but everything can be epigenetic as well. So we can turn off certain genes and turn on genes even from 1,000 years ago that might be beneficial towards us. It's not the be all and end all. And our microbiome changes what we consume and where we go anyway. So we're highly adaptable. So quick roundup: keto, vegan. What was the other one? Ancestral, I think, quite healthy, probably the healthiest. Ancestral is more in line with, I guess, what indigenous tribes ate, or our great grandparents. So bone broths, nose to tail. You really you kind of consume every part of the animal to not waste it, to respect it. Fruits, everything natural, very unprocessed. I tend to feel quite good on more of that ancestral diet, and seasonal as well. Wherever you are in the world, kind of eat what is grown there at the certain times. But my only question with ancestral is, I don't believe that we came from indigenous tribes to modern day. There's not linear time is also an illusion. So that's not necessarily like, oh, it was ideal there and then now we're in mismatched furniture. Because, well, before the period of indigenous tribes where we were, if we've had that experience, there were civilizations that rose and fell. So what were we in Atlantis, for instance, which was a civilization that lasted for hundreds of thousands of years, some say. And the Egyptian era, again, some say that was an era that lasted for hundreds of thousands of years, not just a thousand. Some even say they're simultaneously going on right now, which makes sense, because time doesn't exist. It's all about dipping in and out of experiences. We could even experience those civilizations after this lifetime. So in that way, the ancestral diet is like, yeah, okay, if we have that belief system that we were hunter-gatherers for 100,000 years and that suited us until, factories came along and started poisoning us. It's like, yeah, I'm quite curious to what we were eating in Atlantis and Lemuria. Atlantis was a place of high technology, so I imagine it would probably be maybe quite processed food there. And Lemuria was sort of more of a continent about alchemy and living with the land, so that might be biodynamic kind of growing. But what were we eating in those places? It wasn't always cavemen. So that's what I'd say about the, ancestral. And we're meant to experience different things as well. We're meant to be in this modern time, eating really shit food and then realizing, oh no, it's making me feel shit. I'm gonna make a different decision. So, what's the other one? Carnivore. It's just meat. Don't know. That feels a little excessive to me. Just eating meat. And are you really enjoying the variety of life has to offer by just eating meat? You kind of want like colour and vibrancy and variety, I think. And if I just dip back into those blue zones, again, they weren't eat meat in every meal. And I think part of the problem with eating meat in every meal is that creates a demand for animals to be raised in terrible conditions and quickly, whereas I believe in quality over quantity. So I'd rather eat like an old cow that's lived its whole life rearing its young, eating grass, like having pleasure, choosing its own mates. I'd rather eat that than and pay a little bit more for it and not have as much of it than to have all these animals raised and slaughtered horrifically just so I could eat it in every meal. I think with carnivore, for me, it feels too excessive of meat, and we should maybe lower our intake of meat but make it higher quality. And in terms of every aspect, so like organic, not having sort of any medications, but also that those animals have had as wild and ideal life as a cow or a sheep wants to live, and for them to live, follow their own desires without us meddling with them too much. I think it's quite a simple way to approach diet and life because it can be so confusing. Like, should we eat salt? Should we eat sugar? All the studies make it so confusing and disorientating. Whereas if we just think like, how much sunlight has it had and how much light has it had in its life? Then what we consume is light and we become light as well. It's a mirror. So hope it helps.